Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to have you here, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Erin Beilharz, and I will be leading you through today's discussion. We have a great talk for you today in our series of Let's Talk About the Future at Lufthansa Systems. Today we are going to be talking about UAM and how can the public be won over to this new transport mode. We've had a lot of talks in the past. I think this is number 6 now. And one topic that we've always wanted to tackle and haven't gotten down to it with an overall talk is this idea of the passenger acceptance and also the acceptance of the general public who is on the ground with these air taxis, heavy drones flying overhead. This is the most crucial aspect, according to all of the experts that we've spoken to before in the past. And if we're able to crack this one and get the public to be excited for this technology and the opportunities that it creates for our society, then the technological constraints of the batteries and all of the other things that we have, the security, the airspace, these are all things that we think that we will be able to manage. But without the public, the industry itself will have a very big problem. So today, without further ado, we are going to start introducing our great speakers for the day and get into what is very pressing on all of our minds, which is the public acceptance topic. So as I mentioned, I am Erin Beilharz from Lufthansa Systems. We have been working towards gaining business and entry into the UAM market for about a year now, and Lufthansa Systems, with regards to its consulting and also its products, is the IT arm of the Lufthansa Group. We have a whole bunch of different products serving the classical aviation industry, products with regards to flight operations and ground operations, IT products with regards to how to plan networks, which might be important as well as a transferred service that will be needed within this new air taxi or drone operations technical ecosystem. We have as well products, IT products for revenue management, as well as finance, and then some other things with regards to flight planning and this whole airspace management with our Lido product, which is an industry-leading product for classic aviation, data, AI, data platforms, and then a very important area, which is airline consulting and aviation consulting, and how to transfer the learnings from the aviation industry into some other industries, including the UAM business. So what are the learnings from aviation? Today, we're going to try and pull some of that in as well. We have a list of panelists today, which I think are going to set the scene of the entire ecosystem, starting off with Vassilis Agouridas. And Vassilis is a man who wears many hats, let's say. He is with Airbus looking after the Airbus urban mobility program. They have a big team in Munich, and Vassilis is joining there. But you also have some other hats, which I think you're going to describe in a few minutes better than I will. But Vassilis working on many working groups with regards to public policy with EASA and different government organizations. So bringing in today different aspects of the different roles that he has. So we're looking very, very much forward to hearing from him. Next up, we have joining us at the crack of dawn from Los Angeles, we have Clint Harper with City of LA. And very excited to talk to Clint. I've spoken with him recently, and Clint is an absolute aviation fanatic, I think, from his core, and as well passionate about urban planning. And bringing these two passions together is one of the crusaders of the city of Los Angeles to get this new mode of transportation and also mode of logistics up and running, and to to really make sure that the public acceptance is supporting. So looking forward to hearing what Clint has to say about this topic, because he's an absolute true expert. Next up, we have as well, joining us from California, we have Andrew Cummins from Archer. Archer is, as all of us know, one of the leading UAM operators, manufacturers of a vehicle, and I think that you're doing everything from the design and intent to operate. A very noteworthy and public deal with United, with aircraft futures, and a really great technology. So looking from the aspect of OEM, what does this mean, and what are your experiences with regards to public acceptance, and how much of an issue to solve is this for you? Then we have Mariya Tarabanovska, who is joining us today from London, and Mariya is co-founder of FlightCrowd, which is a London-based acceptance company, and putting together all of the different UAM stakeholders as well. I think, Mariya, if I understand correctly, you're today going to take the human approach, because FlightCrowd is doing a lot of great work on putting together a community, making sure that this topic is exciting for young people, making sure that it is a topic which is brought into career tracks and university tracks and learning tracks, that this is something which we still need to crack. How do we upskill our workforce with all of the different new jobs which currently don't exist, which will be needed to fund this ecosystem with talent? And all of these issues. So looking very much forward to hearing what Mariya has to say. Then we have Tino Herrmann, a colleague of mine, who is Senior Vice President for the people business of Lufthansa Systems. So all of this aviation expertise and know-how at Lufthansa Systems, if it's not on the product side, it sits within Tino's team. Tino today is going to bring in the knowledge and the knowledge transfer from the classic aviation industry, because we have a lot of policy building work behind us. We have a lot of passenger driven work, and we have the good and the bad and the everything in between. So I think that this is also an important aspect for us to bring in. We have a interesting EASA study on the citizens' acceptance of urban air mobility here on the screen for all of you. If we look at this slide here, we can see that public acceptance as a leading issue is very low towards the bottom, actually. But when we talk to people, experts, this is actually one of the biggest issues. Why is it so low here? I think that the infrastructure, safety, noise, environmental impact, these are all public acceptance issues as well. They're named differently, but I think public acceptance is putting a blanket or an umbrella over all of these issues together. So if we look at this, then we can see that the issues throughout the top of the slide here, I think, are very much leading into the reasons that public acceptance is maybe not working 100% or still has a ways to come. So let's talk about these issues later as well. Without further ado, I think that I will go over now and first of all introduce Vassilis. And just as a small item of housekeeping, this event will be recorded and will be made available later on. Will be on YouTube and on our website. And we have a Q&A function in this event that you are free to use. We will try and take your questions from the audience. I have my own questions, but your questions will definitely be more interesting than mine. So please send them over and I will try and weave them in as I see fit. So please use the Q&A. Great, so now I see all of you on the screen together, and Vassilis, away you go.
Thank you, Erin. Just to check the technical stuff that you can see my slides in full mode.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. I'm very happy to join this wonderful panel. And as you mentioned before, I would clarify also that I'm here to represent how Airbus deals with the topic of the public acceptance, to share the lessons learned so far with the wider community. And to this end, as you asked me during our preparations, I will use also the knowledge that I'm bringing from leading the UIC2, the Initiative Cities community of the EU's Smart Cities Marketplace, as well as the fact that I'm leading the committee at ASD, which is the Association of Aerospace Industries in Europe. So let's take, I will try to keep the 5 to 6 minutes. First of all, what Airbus is doing in urban air mobility. It is part of the wider portfolio on sustainable aviation. So this is the future of flight. And perhaps already you have seen some of our demonstrators that we have developed in order to better understand the challenges, not only from the technological perspective, but from the technological perspective. And this is where I would like to draw a sort of distinction when we talk about UEM and the urban air mobility, where we can have a look at the system, and by system we can mean the different elements of this wider ecosystem, and also look at this wider ecosystem. So I think we have, when we want to understand the wider concept of the acceptance, we have to look at the maturity of the system itself and the wider ecosystem. And when we say the system, in fact, there are many different standalone systems that have to come and work together, whether it is the actual eVTOLs themselves, or parts that relate to infrastructure development, like the vertiport, for example, development, or the passenger solution, or the air traffic management required for this type of operations, which by itself, it's a whole system, like the UTM systems I'm talking about. So the first phase, in this first phase of UAM, we have seen not only Airbus, but all the main different, development of these different systems and the work towards maturity of them. And now we're going in a phase where we have gained more experience, so we can go more towards the certifiable technology. And this is, again, is not only the eVTOL, it's all the different systems that they have come together, and also explore how these different systems can work together. This means we acknowledge that is not something it can be done by one company alone. It is definitely collaborative work. It is more than just even an industry work, like an aviation sector work. It is more cross-sectoral, in fact, and transdisciplinary. So the next big question will be, in fact, what will be this type of market? There are different types of forecasts when we can try to understand what is the potential of the market. And this could be only realized when the certified vehicles and the wider systems will be there. And then we can really go on scaled operations. Until then, I think we can do only certain projections with taking certain assumptions, but we do not really know if they will be held true. So there is a big unknown there about, for example, who will be really the customers, what will be the actual use cases of this technology. And from this perspective, I would like to go now to the challenges that are coming when we look at the wider ecosystem. And of course, from what we discuss here, it is not just the aviation, say, supply chain or extended enterprise, but we go to areas that relate now to the ground infrastructure and to the actual passenger solution. And if the ultimate benefit, if we talk again in the context of a passenger, because there are different variations of it, whether you talk, for example, for logistics or cargo delivery, or even using smaller drones for medical applications. If we take now the front of the passenger, the actual benefit that the passengers are looking is this end-to-end passenger experience. But this can be enabled only if all the other elements are orchestrated. So vertiports, for example, and the network of vertiports within a city or a region, it is a critical element. And where are we flying from? Where to go? Is it about, for example, taking off a plane and taking an eVTOL to move to another area? And then is it just this airport, helipad, vertiport isolated thing? Not really. It is about integrating this in the urban fabric. And this is where we have to address the many different interfaces with the urban infrastructure, whether it is about physical or more increasingly digital assets. So in fact, this urban integration is a key factor if we want to realize this type of benefits. This means that UAM with regard to passenger or logistics, in fact, it has to be an integrated element of the service mobility systems. And not only that, but of the wider urban planning. At this moment, I would like to highlight the fact that UAM, although it is coming from the origins from the aviation sector and the maturity and electrification of aviation, it will be or is already being subject to policies for passenger-centric mobility services like mobility as a service and the wider sustainable urban mobility policies like the European Union's or Commission's sustainable urban mobility plans. And this is a very important consideration because they bring further constraints and requirements on what it is expected by such a system. So here are some more elements about policy making. It is definitely more than aviation regulations. Of course, the safety of the aircraft is the utmost and highest priority in aviation. This is why it is the safest mode of travel. However, in this case, it is really only the means and not the end. And there are significant advancements despite the different challenges in the different areas, whether it is the vehicle certification or the U-Space UTM development. From the policy perspective, and this is where we start to go away from the pure, I would say, typical aviation regulatory policy orientation, the key questions that are emerging is, what are really the use cases for urban air mobility? For what are we going to use this technology? For whom? For when? What will be the types of aircraft that we may want to use in such urban or wider suburban regional environments? And here the key point is not whether it is regional or urban or suburban. The fact is that we're talking about low-level flights over populated areas, potentially at scale. And this is the premise and promise of UAM, to become at scale. So this means that we need to address factors that go beyond the typical business ecosystem. Of course, technology maturity, business relationships, partnerships with the wider extended enterprise, they have to be there, and the user acceptance or passenger acceptance. But this is not enough. We need to consider, in fact, the impact of UAM. And this is by taking the wider lens of corporate social responsibility and environmental, societal, and governance perspectives. This means here there are some new elements that we have to consider when we define the business model, the sustainable business model for UAM. And here, when we compare to other aviation sectors, we have to do it right first time. UAM is something that does not really exist. It's not about electrification of helicopters. It's something about different. Helicopters have never been used at scale, although this has been our aim for many years ago, but we never managed to go to that end. And this is, I think, what makes UAM so unique and different. And this is happening because of the convergence of the many different technologies. So here is about to lead and to take responsibility for the wider societal business ecosystem. And to this end, it's becoming increasingly recognized and acknowledged that cities and regions are at the center of this imperative for co-creation. And also co-create not only with the actual citizens or authorities, but across sectors and disciplines. In fact, here, it's becoming more and more prevalent the role of cities and regions as catalysts for the societal engagement. Erin mentioned before about the acceptance study by EASA, and there are 10 key findings. I will not go in detail of it, but EASA developed this study prompted by or recognizing that cities and regions have an important role for making this work. So they have done an extensive study across 6 different cities in Europe. And you can see here that some of the findings are not purely linked to technical topics. So for example, when we find on the environment that priority is protection of wildlife, or when we see about the fact that when we talk the ground infrastructure of mobility, that this has to be integrated well, many of these topics perhaps they go outside the remit of EASA. However, they have been identified as key enablers or constraints for the wider acceptance and deployment of UAM. So what we observe here, if you look in a more detail, is that social acceptance, the use cases for UAM depend heavily on social acceptance topics. So it is not just a matter whether there is a market or whether there is a market business case. You may have a business case, but you may not check the social acceptance issues. And then you have not a sustainable business. So of course, the technical and technological topics, they're a big challenge. And like reducing noise, for example, it's a huge challenge and constraint. However, these are not the only challenges. And at Airbus, we have been realizing that and working on social acceptance topics very early on in the endeavor and adventure, I would say, of UAM. And we have established, proposed and established through collaboration with the European Commission, the UAM Initiative Cities Community, which is part of the EU Smart Cities Marketplace. Here I need to clarify that this is what Airbus has proposed, is facilitating, but Airbus is not treating it as a project of Airbus. This is the facilitation of Airbus towards the wider ecosystem. And this is one of the minimum responsibilities we have as a big company. So here we facilitate a community of cities, because what this community is doing is putting the cities and the regions to be on the driver's seat for defining how we want UAM technology, related technology, to be used. Here you see the coverage of this initiative. It is changing continuously and also has attracted, because of its work, interest from cities and regions from Japan and US. The motto of the actual initiative, as you see, it's walk, ride, drive, fly. It acknowledges by definition that the fly element has to be complementary to the other modes of mobility. It is about, in fact, driving the sustainable and responsible transition of urban mobility to the vertical, to the third dimension. So to that, it is imperative that we are city-centric and really driven by the needs of citizens. So a lot of work needs to be done to understand not just the passenger needs, but the wider citizens. One of the characteristics of the UAM is that it has impact on people who also don't use it, the non-users. And the cities have been working on... Yes.
Vassilis, and because we are getting a little bit over for you, we would like to hand over now to Clint, who represents the cities, just to make a transition.
Absolutely. Just one final word.
I give you one final word, then we hand over.
Yes, final word. In all of this, the cities drive, and I think you have realized that in the urban air mobility, and when we talk about acceptance, there is a shift, or there must be a shift from the question, who is the customer and what is the market, to what is the impact and governance on the UAM. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you put Frankfurt here to make us happy? Thank you very much. So, Clint, I'm going to turn over to you now. Thank you, Vassilis, and very interesting. And from now, the City of LA perspective, Vassilis, I think, set it up to talk about the organization of cities and how crucial the cities are towards this public acceptance view. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on and the challenges that you're facing?
Sure. How do you hear me?
Very good.
How do you hear me? Awesome. Okay. So really, from what we talked about the other day, I wanted to kind of go back, maybe a few years before my aviation career started 23 years ago. And, I do this because a lot of times in public engagement and community acceptance, we talk about meeting, the client, the customer, where they're at, but that's also a two-way street, and so I want to share a little bit about how I got here and, where my values are with all this, so that we can better understand, how this is all forming and how we might better work together in the future. And this is kind of what I do, in my outreach efforts, today as well. And we found a lot of success with that. And so, probably, say 24 years ago, I was living a life where I didn't do myself many favors. I didn't do well in high school. I dropped out of college. I, was working as a construction laborer, installation installer, and a variety of warehouse jobs, and just really didn't do a lot of things in my life to set myself up for success. And I had a moment of clarity and realized that this was not the life that I wanted to live and that I needed to make some changes, and I didn't have a lot of self-confidence, didn't have hardly any self-discipline. And so, I started exploring ways and how I could rectify that, and get my life back on the path that I think was more how I wanted. And so that led me to the military recruiting office. Places where I can get confidence and I can get discipline in abundance, and so I ultimately decided to join the Air Force, and my aviation career started 23 years ago in the Air Force as a flight line avionics and sensors maintainer on the AC-130 Spectre gunships. I worked on and employed with this aircraft and an amazing team, with it for 6 years. Wanting a change, I was accepted into a retraining program within the Air Force, and I retrained into the airfield management career field. Within airfield management, you're exposed to a variety of aviation subfields. An airfield manager typically transitions through an aircraft dispatcher track, then on to airport operations, then to airport management, and then to airport planning. I also spent 4 years in education and training where I managed the Air Force's airfield management schoolhouse, where we developed and taught all the aforementioned specialties, and also airspace management. And so it really enabled me to have a really well-rounded, background, this set me up, for really what I'm doing today. And I'm tremendously grateful for that. I wouldn't be here without without that career and without the military, what the military was able to provide me. Something else the military provided me was I was able to be blessed enough to travel all around the world and visit many places. And this inspired a real curiosity and love for cities. So after I retired from the military, I returned to school to pursue this love for cities by earning a Master of City and Metropolitan Planning and a graduate certificate in urban design. And within these studies, I also learned about what they called wicked problems. These are problems that are very dynamic. They don't have a single answer, and they're constantly changing. Their examples of these are food insecurity, transportation inequity, homelessness, and there's a whole list of these types of problems. And I started to feel that aviation wasn't doing enough to be a part of the solution to these problems. And it really kind of got me disgruntled, which is kind of a crisis, in my life, because aviation had given me so much, and I was starting to see some flaws within the industry that I loved. And, for a time, I even wanted to leave the industry and transition to a career that was more engaged on these type of issues, to help communities. And thankfully, through the mentorship of some of my colleagues and professors, I was convinced that I could do more to leverage my experience and passions to make aviation a better industry that serves a wider range of people. So after graduation, I started working as a transportation planner, but it didn't take long for aviation to pull me back into, to suck me back in. And I became the state airport system planner and economic development lead for the state of Utah. And in here, I started to help communities and regions understand the potential and value of their aviation infrastructure through the lens of economic development, with a particular focus on small airports, small general aviation airports, and airports that are typically underappreciated and underutilized. And it was around this time that Uber released its white paper on UAM. And there were some things that I really loved about the vision, like using underutilized infrastructure and parking garages. And there were things that concerned me, like relying on ride-hailing services, which I do believe have a role within our cities, but to really solve first last mile solutions and promote equity, I felt strongly that UAM needed to complement the existing transit services and the existing transportation system. But regardless of, a difference of opinion around the vision, I also understood that for any of this to become a reality, all of these plans would require transportation and land use policy changes, new zoning, permitting, which means that this will all eventually need to become before a public meeting, and all the marketing at the time was really targeting investors, not necessarily communities. So I engaged the industry early on as a community advocate, and when the UAM fellow position came along within Los Angeles, it was perfectly aligned with my goals and my new values, that had been formed through all this, all my time there. And since I joined the city of Los Angeles by the way of Urban Movement Labs this past March, I've been working hard on an outreach and education effort to inform stakeholders of what UAM actually is, and really get away from a lot of the hype, the investor hype that's around flying cars and the Jetsons, and refocus this all back on aviation and all of the solutions that UAM offers for today's most pressing problems within the aviation industry. And so we have partnered with a variety of ecosystem partners, Archer being one of them, to help us understand, to help the city understand how this new technology will impact cities. But the feedback is also two ways. So the city is also able to help our ecosystem partners understand what is truly behind the transportation issues in a city like Los Angeles. What are the city's current goals in addressing them, and how can we align with others? And we've engaged with non-transportation or non-aviation, community-based organizations, transportation advocacy groups, and we're really understanding, how can we align ourselves as allies with all the rest of the pedestrian advocates, the bicycle advocates, the transit advocates. We really want to work together, at integrating this new technology in a way that's going to improve the overall transportation system, create a better quality life, and mitigate, any negative externalities that may come. And so with that, I think it's time for me to pass the baton on.
Absolutely, but really interesting. And we have already in the comments from Darren Milet, thanks for your service, Clint. So already that's a very nice one. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to Andrew now from Archer. Take it away, Andrew.
Great, thanks, Erin. And can you guys see my slides?
Yes.
Fantastic. And I also second that, Clint. Thank you for your service, especially on Veterans Day. It's great timing. But more to the point, so it's great to be here today. Thanks to the Lufthansa team for bringing us all together. This is really an important topic as this emerging industry continues to take shape. We've made a lot of great progress as an industry over the last few years. We've really built a lot of momentum, and now it's really time to hone in on, what are some of the use cases to truly showing what are the benefits and moving the industry forward. So just very quickly, I lead Archer's go-to-market strategy, mainly focused around our collaboration with cities to seamlessly integrate urban air mobility operations into the communities in which we're going to be operating. I work very closely with Clint, as he mentioned just previously. And then, so over the next few minutes, let me give you a little overview of Archer, who we are, our vision and mission, and then I can dive into some of the work that we're doing to build public trust and acceptance. So just very quickly, I think this beautiful picture probably gives away what we're doing at Archer, but in short, we're developing an all-electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. We are targeting generally the passenger market, the intra-city passenger market with our aircraft. But importantly, we're not only developing, certifying, and manufacturing this aircraft, but we're also going to be operating this aircraft as a UAM ride-sharing service to transport people in and around the urban environment. So let me just quickly, to kind of set the foundation, start with our mission. Look, it's simple, but very powerful, right? To advance the benefits of sustainable air mobility. Now, you might notice the word benefits is specifically mentioned in our mission statement. And I think that's really important because, this aerospace advancement around all electric flight really, will enable us to connect communities like never before. It will allow us to give people back, their most valuable resource, in which many instances is time. We'll be able to inspire a new generation of air travelers, or micro explorers, as we call them at Archer. And then really, ultimately, it's about supporting our goals for decarbonization, specifically in the aviation industry. So, just a quick overview of where we've been and where we're going. So it's been a really exciting year for the Archer team. You might have seen that we went public a couple months ago, and really that's important because it provides us with the capital necessary to execute on that mission that I just discussed, right? It allows us to get through the development and certification process with our aircraft, stand up our manufacturing facilities, and then really begin to build out the supporting ecosystem necessary for our aerial ride-sharing business. We've also announced some important strategic partners to help us accelerate our process to market. United is our launch customer. They've ordered $1 billion worth of aircraft. Also, they have an option for an additional $500 million of aircraft. And really importantly, we're going to work with United to use their experience as an airline operator over a long period of time to really build a really effective, efficient UAM service for our customers and riders in the future. We've also partnered with Stellantis. Stellantis is the 4th largest auto manufacturer by volume in the world. We'll work with them on scale and advanced manufacturing capabilities. Look to use some of their supply chain that they've already got set up, so we can bring the cost to manufacture this aircraft to a very affordable level. And then lastly, we've announced a partnership with Reef. Reef owns and operates, I believe, over 4,500 parking structures and parking lots across the United States and Europe. Those could be retrofitted, lightly retrofitted for landing sites to build out this network of vertiports to create convenient, accessible places for people to kind of begin and end their urban air mobility journey. We've announced partnerships to launch our service in Los Angeles and Miami. Like I said, working very closely with Clint and the UML team to collaboratively build the policy frameworks and really, start to earn public acceptance and trust in Los Angeles. And then lastly, and very importantly, we've finalized our G1 issue paper from the FAA, which really establishes our path to achieve FAA type certification for our aircraft. So really transitioning to our aircraft and its benefits, I think it's important to point out that, while we're building this aircraft, we're also building an entire product portfolio and ecosystem to enable the UAM ride-sharing service that I talked about. Now, obviously, the aircraft is the crown jewel of that product portfolio. The aircraft you see here is Maker. We unveiled Maker this summer, and this is our full-scale demonstrator. And look out very shortly for our first flight, which will be later this year. We're very excited about that, and really all of the the data that we're going to be collecting on the systems and subsystems of the aircraft. Not to get too philosophical, but using history as a guide, I think every aerospace advancement has created substantial societal benefit, and really has created a more interconnected and prosperous world. And I really think that this eVTOL evolution, it's no different. Really what we're looking to do here is provide aviation transportation that is, as it says here on this slide, safer, quieter, cleaner, and cheaper than it's ever been before. Safer in the fact that we're using something called distributed electric propulsion technology. That means that you can have, there's multiple redundancies built into this aircraft. There's really no single points of failure like you have on some aircraft today. And it will also be certified by the aviation authorities like any other aircraft in the sky. Quieter in the fact that it has an all-electric powertrain. that allows for a significant reduction in noise emissions. If you kind of use the comparable to electric vehicles on the road today versus combustion engine vehicles, there's a significant difference in noise. Much cleaner, again, all electric, which means you have zero local emissions. And that's really helping us advance the goals of global decarbonization. And lastly, cheaper. Electricity is cheaper than fossil fuels. And it allows for a significant, the all-electric propulsion system allows for a significant reduction in maintenance costs by eliminating those single points of failure and really, beginning to reduce, the complex powertrain. So then kind of bringing this all together, everything really starts with safety. When we think about public benefits and acceptance, there's so many different use cases, really valuable use cases, and we've hit on those a little bit. It's not just the passenger use case. There's, middle mile cargo, last mile delivery, air ambulatory and emergency response, all sorts of different use cases. But really, everything starts with safety. What we're doing at Archer, everything we do is to ensure high levels of rider and public safety and security at all times. And I think in a rapidly changing industry such as this, engagement, education, and acceptance often go hand in hand. It's on us as an industry and as an ecosystem to prove the benefits, and that's what we're working to do. Part of that is working collaboratively with city officials and policymakers to thoughtfully integrate UAM into our communities. Engaging with stakeholders from diverse perspectives to help us build really the social license to operate. And that's part of our work with UML and Clint, as he described it. I think it's also really important, to think about equity and access. I think over time, we need to ensure that this is a mode of transit that's accessible really to all and to the masses, and not just really a play toy, if you will, for those with means. It's also been discussed, how can we use this new form of transportation to create a multimodal transportation system to enhance and complement existing transportation infrastructure? I think that's very important. This isn't about just reducing congestion, at the highest level. It's about complementing and enhancing what's already in place. And then I think lastly, we have an opportunity really to spur economic opportunities in the communities in which we're operating. That could be through local workforce development, that could be through, the development that might naturally take place around vertiport sites and other economic, impact. And I think, not to get too philosophical here, but if you think about ports, a vertiport, for example, but ports, they've historically been major economic drivers for communities. If you think about shipping ports or airports, those are generally major economic drivers for communities. And really, we view vertiports of the future being very similar in their impact, on communities. So I look forward to the conversation going forward, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Andrew. Very, very interesting in looking at ports and the emergence of harbors and ports and all of this infrastructure in the past, and seeing what it could develop into in the future, I think is a very interesting take on it. And I was going to ask Mariya, but I'll let you introduce yourself first, but ask you, because you're also got more interaction with the next generation and the students, looking at career paths and all of these kind of things, to see later on where you have found the most interest, or which countries are more interested in training into these areas. But first of all, I'm going to let you introduce yourself without taking your steam. And Mariya, over to you.
Thank you very much, Erin. Thank you very much, everyone, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Very difficult to speak after fellow industry colleagues, so let me try and sort of explain a bit about myself and a bit about what we do at FlightCrowd, and indeed why my team and I sleep and breathe public acceptance for public engagement first and foremost. Before we get to FlightCrowd, my background, I have both a technical background background in aerospace engineering, but also in creative arts as well. I'm a product designer as well. And I think truly combining those two backgrounds, and Clint was mentioning, his background and how his experiences have helped him, enhance his career and very much brought him to where he is. And I think definitely the more backgrounds you have, the more diverse experiences you have, the more interesting your life becomes and the more your views change. And I think through combining that passion for technology and innovation, but also passion for human-centered design first and foremost, and very much placing the end user and the human at the center of all innovation, I was able to get to the point where here I am passionate about aerospace and passionate about the future of flight, but more than anything, I'm very keen to bring this to people around the world and very much make sure that their opinions are heard, that their views are taken on board, and they are there and they are able to contribute to the future that we are creating. And so this is how FlightCrowd was born. And FlightCrowd is an open urban air mobility community, and we are focusing on bridging that gap between the public and the industry. Indeed, we are there to support the industry. And if I may just share one little slide with yourselves, I'll explain the message in a moment. But it is about that being that bridge, and it is about connecting all the relevant dots. And we have the 3 pillars I'll come to in a moment. Very, very simple. But when I talk about public engagement and who is the public, who is the audience that I refer to, well, the audience is pretty much everyone on this planet. We are talking about the need to engage with young people, with the regulators, with the governments, with the parents, with the academia. We're talking about so many individuals and communities that need to be brought on board, need to be brought up to speed with the industry achievements and industry progress. And that is quite a big challenge. And indeed, I'm very, very happy to be working not on my own, but indeed with my colleagues at FlightCrowd and indeed with the industry. But this is hopefully just trying to explain to you how big of a task we're facing. We really need to engage the majority of the planet who haven't ever heard about urban air mobility. We need to bring them on board. We need to not just inform them about this progress, but indeed win their hearts and minds, win their public support, and as was mentioned, the social license to operate indeed. And so why public engagement? Well, because public engagement for us is about including all of their aforementioned audiences and saying to them, look, it is about your future. This industry is your future. This industry will offer you careers. It will offer you, again, safer, sustainable transportation, a new choice of mobility, a new choice of how to transport, yourself, your family, cargo, and so on and so forth. But it will open more choices, but it will also add to that dimension again, the workforce piece. So we're talking about not just operating the vehicle, or not just engaging with the customers, with the public who will be the end users, but it is about realizing that the public, everyone on this planet, can potentially contribute to this industry in a very, very meaningful way through either, again, regulating this future, operating the vehicles on the ground, in air, helping with the infrastructure, again, very much all the different parts of the ecosystem that will need to come together. Every single one of us has the potential to be involved regardless of our background, be it STEM, engineering, arts, humanities, business. Everyone, journalists, again, project managers, businessmen, media, hospitality. There'll be so many more jobs created, so many opportunities within this industry, and it's important that the public understands it and very much sees this as an integral part of their future, not their present and their future. And so, indeed, what we are doing at FlightCrowd, and this is when I'm actually starting to talk about what you can see on the slide, is indeed about addressing that piece of, okay, well, I know about the industry and now I want to say, what now? How can I get involved? We're helping the community to get prepared for a career in this field. We're helping people to upskill, to reskill, but also again to very much start, if they haven't had any experience whatsoever, to start at that level 0, but already come out on the other end feeling confident and comfortable with the technology, with the industry, with the terminology, and also indeed with themselves and their abilities, and the fact that they are able to contribute in a meaningful way to this industry. We have the 3 pillars that Flightcard is very much promoting, and it is inform, engage, and inspire. And the reason we don't think, you know, we just focus on public acceptance is because I'm very, very keen for everyone to understand public acceptance is not something that will be achieved in a day. It is a journey that we need to take our general public, our population, global population on. And it starts with very much the solid foundation. Again, the engineer inside me is like, well, we need to get the foundations right. And so that foundation is the information, being exposed to not only the true and the relevant sources and very much the accurate sources, but also being exposed to the sources that you can understand. Again, talking to so many friends and families and apologies, not colleagues, but so many friends and families and teachers, those who come from outside of this industry, you see that there is a big gap in their knowledge that really need to be filled. And it's important to not just keep talking our language, language of acronyms, UAM, AAM, eVTOL, ESTOL, you name it. It's about breaking down those barriers. It's about breaking down those chunks of information and exposing our industry, breaking that bubble that we are living in and letting the public in. So it is about, first and foremost, informing of what is happening, making sure the public really understands, and again, understands it and sort of leaves them with this information as much as we do. It's also about the engagement of the community that comes from very much building the dialogue. It needs to be, it absolutely has to be a two-way system. We can't ever, or we can't keep thinking potentially that the industry will push out technology to market and expect the public buy-in. It will not happen, not in our world, not in the 21st century, not in the majority of the countries around the world, with a lot of, where the individuals have voice and have freedom of choice. I think we really need to build that dialogue and make sure that public feels like, again, their opinions are heard and there are ways to express their opinions and their thoughts. And it is important to be very much transparent as well and be keen to take this feedback on board, to co-create, to co-design this future together, but also to say, look, we want you here because we see that you will be, contributing, you will be benefiting in the future. It is about inspiring the future generations. I've mentioned the young people, and at the moment, no, they're not the ones who are paying the taxes, and they're not the ones who'll be potentially getting on board the vehicles tomorrow, but the vehicles aren't here on a large scale tomorrow and don't have vehicles, the industry operating at full scale just yet. But when the industry is at that stage, those young people who are currently in academia, they'll be the ones who will have the right to vote, but also the freedom and ability to support you very much financially, but also through being employed by the industry. So it is very, very important to engage with them early, to not lose them to other careers that may seem to be more interesting or challenging or appealing or pay better, but indeed also to just say, look, this is the future that we are creating and that you will play a big part in it. This is the future for you, and it is, again, sustainable and safer and better than what we have at the moment. When we talked,
maybe the issue is going to be, and this reminds me of something, I moved to Vietnam in 2004, a long time ago, and my grandmother at the time, who was over 90, she said, "Oh dear, how is it going in Cambodia?" So it wasn't quite right, but she kind of knew something was happening. So if all of the young people are excited about careers in urban air mobility or in vertiports or whatever, and this starts to become a communication, and then their parents start posting it on Facebook because they're proud of them, or somebody in the neighborhood is doing something, there might be some kind of an industry snowballing effect, and then all of the different stakeholders, by hook or by crook, are somehow on the line. and
Yeah,
engage.
Precisely. So yeah, I'll just finish up. Thank you very much for stepping there. And yes, I just wanted to, just a few final words. Precisely, the young people, and we really see this, through our outreach programs. And indeed, I would really invite for you to have a look at our website. And we've just enrolled another initiative this week, literally today, and another one last week, to look into engaging young people further into this discussion and providing them the tools and the platform to share their ideas, to share their thoughts, their visions. But also, again, we understand that if we get into their hearts and minds, if we really attract their opinion, if they really are supportive of this, they'll go and share it with their friends, they'll go and share it with their parents, with their grandparents. This is potentially one of the easiest audiences almost to interact with, because of how important for young people it is to share with others, what's going on in their world, what excites them. They will go and naturally, through the word of mouth, share more and more news about this industry and attract more and more people into it. So I genuinely think, this is one of the great ways, but also I'm just so passionate about STEM outreach and just engaging with the communities. But very lastly, for everyone that we're interacting with, the question is, what's in it for me? And so when we're talking about, economic benefits to ourselves as the industry, or economic benefits for the country, it's the macro scale, but people are really thinking, this is my life, and how will it affect my life? And it's important to always think about, have your personas, have your audiences, and keep interacting with them and keep asking those questions. What do you want? And very much be responsive to those answers, and very much create and innovate products and services that will respond to the public need. Otherwise, I don't think this industry will succeed. It's only through co-creation, co-design, but also involving the public in integration, being transparent, progressing forward together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mariya. Tino, over to you.
Yeah, Erin, thank you very much, and thank you as well, together with Katrin and Hildegard, for this event. Also, a warm welcome to everybody who is joining the conference today. I'm excited to be here together with all the other impressed speakers. My name is Tino Herrmann. I'm responsible for professional services at Lufthansa Systems. Together with my team, we offer aviation expertise and project management experiences for the implementation of our Lufthansa Systems IT products to the Lufthansa Group, but also to our aviation customers worldwide. We also provide global aviation consulting with core competences to optimize and digitalize airlines in the areas of the customer journey, operations, commercials, maintenance, repair and overhaul, startup consulting, and at the moment, and I hope this will end, also Corona crisis management. I personally believe in a transformation of the traditional aviation industry into a multi-mobility system and connect with other mobility solutions. Individual and inner city mobility, carbon neutral mobility are just some of the keywords of a new mobility ecosystem. But beside the technical challenges that are fascinating, and as we see and heard today, are already amazingly far on the way, I see the key to make it happen in the acceptance of the passengers and their customer journey. They really need to see their benefits out of it, and mobility needs to be safe and payable. As we also heard some minutes ago, at the end, the individual and public acceptance of such a new mobility system is the key. People, cities, governments need to accept it and use it as we are using cars and trains and aircraft today. It will also bring a new infrastructure in our daily life. It will not substitute, definitely not substitute what we have, but it will enhance the different ways of mobility, how to go from point A to point B. The benefits out of the new mobility solution is on the hand. It will be quicker, it will be faster, it will be greener, and it will be autonomous. Just as an example, to fly successfully in city centers, you need to make sure that the air mobility vehicle is 100% safe, and you need to get passengers excited to use it. Otherwise, no one will use it and there will be no return on investment. This is very, very close to what we know from the classical airline world today. To be realistic, Lufthansa Systems are not in the front line role ramping up public acceptance, but our technology and data solutions supports all things that will make acceptance more likely. This includes, for example, safe flying, a smooth operation, seamless digital journey, just to name only some. The Single European Sky ATM research program named CESAR, we also worked on measures to get public acceptance. So there is a lot of what we can bring in from the company side. We at Lufthansa Systems want to be part of the current transformation process, definitely into a new mobility world. Our deep classic aviation know-how, our products, our data source, our consulting experiences will help to bring a new air mobility world from a startup environment into a full operational, highly accepted stage. So now I'm very looking forward to this panel discussion, and so far I can say thank you very much.
Thank you, Tino. And one follow-up question to what you just said to introduce yourself, and like to just ask you, what are for you, coming from this technology background of supporting, first of all, automotive in your last company with industry solutions, and now within systems of supporting aviation, what are the underlying technology must-haves that that our classic industry can lend to this industry, which are going to be mandatory for success?
I'm totally convinced, and we heard it several times, it's safety. It has to be very, very safe. If I'm looking to the automotive industry, and we are looking to driverless cars, I think it's a long, long way. So we need somehow to speed up and to shorten the process, that it's public accepted. We just heard from the colleagues here in the discussion that there is an infrastructure needed, but I think the infrastructure point is not such a big point, because we do not need to build new airports and everything. There is something already there which needs to be on a next higher level and to be available. Yeah, but at the end, I mean, the industry is on the way, and I hope I can fly in the near future with an eVTOL, I don't know, from Lüneburg here to Hamburg and maybe to Frankfurt.
Thank you, Tino. Okay, back to you, Vassilis. I would like to know, you mentioned cultural and societal embracement before. So what is, from your experience with these working groups and task forces, what is really going to be the tipping point for getting this societal embracement?
What it is not just the personal benefit. It is, as Mariya mentioned, is all the different actors that have realized, and we as a society have realized the benefit, and in fact the trade-off in the context of sustainability, because there will be a trade-off. Just take the pure physics. It consumes more energy to fly than to go on the ground. So there must be a sort of what Andrew mentioned, the social license or the social contract for us to understand, okay, there is this technology, how are we going to use it? And this is a very critical element, and you can see it in all the communities around different cities. I would say no matter what is the cultural background, especially, I mean, with the initiative, when the city started to join, they were very excited 4 years ago about this technology coming, and everyone instinctively talked about air taxis. But very quickly, when people start to realize what this might mean, and especially even, you know, the mayors that have the political responsibility they started to think twice about how we're going to communicate this to our society, to our citizens. Who is going to use this? This is one of the biggest questions. Who is going to use this? Because we say we make it affordable, we make it like that. So what are we going to do? Are we going to congest the skies? Because ultimately, it is about making it available to everyone.
So from Mariya's talk before, from her introduction, we have really the idea of training young people, training the future workforce to be able to build up this new industry. Then I have another impulse from the last event which we had, which I thought was a fantastic event because it really delved into a lot of these topics here of public acceptance and what's going to come first. And this idea, and I wanted to open this idea up to the panel to discuss it. This idea of drones for good and medical drones and firefighting drones and middle mile logistics and ambulatory drones. And Andrew, you mentioned this before as well. Are we going to actually start with drone taxis? And we mentioned this idea of that we don't want to create something which is exclusive and only for the rich. We want to create something which is for all society, and that there's benefits which outweigh any kind of technology discussions, and that the discussion shifts. What is your opinion with regards to all of these other use cases which are not passenger facing of opening the floodgates for public acceptance, and that this is really the drones for good movement is going to actually pave the way that people get very used to seeing these things in the sky, hearing them and feeling excited about, oh, this is maybe a human heart off to save somebody's life, which is traveling over my garden or whatever.
Yeah, I'll start quickly. So it's a great question, and I think that's what's interesting about this new advancement, really in flying and aerospace, is that you have really so many applications for this technology, and I think you're going to see a crawl, walk, run approach to how these different types of aircraft are, really integrated into our society. And where they're integrated into our society. I think, Erin, you had mentioned the word, drone. I think drone has a context of being an unmanned aerial system. Unmanned aerial systems, I think, serve great purpose and value as we begin to, create public acceptance and show the value of these products. And that can be around things such as organ transport or last mile delivery or whatever it may be. I think it's also important, though, to denote the distinction between unmanned, kind of smaller unmanned platforms and larger passenger carrying type of aircraft, like what Archer's building, which will very much be a piloted aircraft. Mm-hmm. And I think building on the thought, kind of the thought train of safety, while you can say, that, maybe human air is not necessarily, or piloted aircraft is not necessarily safer than something that is flown by, an avionics software system. The reality is there's a perception of safety, which I think is also very important when we're talking about, building public acceptance, building public trust. And that's all part of this crawl, walk, run approach is, we're not just going to put a whole bunch of unmanned systems in the sky at once. We're going to start, some might be unmanned, some will certainly be piloted like Archer's aircraft. They won't all be in the urban environment all at once. You will have some that are in more remote locations, helping to provide medical services to those in remote areas that otherwise couldn't access quick emergency or other types of medical services. You'll have some of these like Archer's service operating maybe more in an urban environment. So you're not just going to have a flood of vehicles, all of a sudden crowding out the sky, I think is kind of the major point.
So that's interesting, but then you say your aircraft are piloted. What is then the difference between an Archer aircraft and a Piper? Then the question then becomes not which technology it is. The technology is obviously better. It's a greener, more sustainable, quieter version of something that we already have. It's jumping around from A to B. Then I was wondering, Clint, do you have any kind of feedback from US is a general aviation paradise. You can fly from A to B wherever you are, not that regulated, and it's really working. Is there any feedback from your region of Los Angeles, which probably has a lot of this general aviation, that there will be an easy acceptance just for the jump in technology if it would be piloted, or in cases where it is piloted?
All right, having problems with the mute button there. Yeah, so I think on the piloted side, the automated technology, I think just coming from the connected autonomous vehicle side of the house, is the technology has had a bit of a rough start, and so with that, that's kind of shaping the technology around all autonomous operations. While I think those of us within the aviation industry are pretty confident, that we're not going to experience the same challenges. Managing traffic in the sky, is a lot different, than trying to manage it on the ground. But that being said, we still have to take this crawl, walk, run approach, as Andrew mentioned, to really, start introducing the public to, what automation looks like, and so I think, big problem we have in the industry is that we always look out to 2040, 2050, and what that's going to look like, and what that future looks like. And we lose sight of, what is it going to look like in 2024 when Archer's aircraft is certified? What does it look like in 2028 when we start seeing a scaling up of these services? And so in 2024, we understand that the automation side of the house, particularly probably for passenger aircraft, isn't going to be there yet. And so they are going to be piloted by licensed pilots, probably with some kind of endorsement, showing experience. And those are all things that are going to help with public acceptance on, how are these new aircraft going to operate. In parallel, we'll also see, some of the smaller UAS systems start exploring and taking advantage of the beyond visual line of sight technologies. And, again, we go straight to autonomy, but there's going to be other steps of where you have remote piloted operations. You're going to advance beyond that to probably a remote pilot, maybe perhaps operating, multiple aircraft. It might be handled similar to how the air traffic control structure is handled, where you have pilots handling an en route phase, pilots handling a departure phase, and pilots handling an arrival phase. And so there are many steps that we can take in between, that's going to help us work towards that public acceptance. And really public acceptance, I think on this end is more public understanding. And this goes back to a lot of my work has been around trying to get away from the flying cars imagery that's out there, and really refocusing back on aviation, because in aviation we've solved a lot of things. Aviation has a tremendous safety record, and we do things very methodically, and we don't just jump into things like some of the other industries do, and so I think as we focus back on aviation and latch on to aviation's history of doing things right and moving along at a pace, that makes sense, that keeps people safe in the air and keeps people safe on the ground, we're going to bring public acceptance along with us, with that.
So we all talk about public acceptance as being the key issue that we need to solve, that we believe that the technology will be there and come along. We believe infrastructure is a bit hard, but we will crack it. And public acceptance seems to be this kind of unknown. But what are the real issues? And I have a question from anonymous from the audience. But what are the social acceptance issues really? Is it noise? They say a barking dog might be louder. I was there at the Volodrome launch in Hamburg at ITS 3 weeks ago. Honestly, it wasn't that loud. What are these social acceptance issues that are really the burning ones? What are people afraid of? Vassilis.
I think if you look at a lot of the efforts around airport closures right now with small airport closures, they first start off, being around noise, emissions, and then, who in the community is actually benefiting from these airports, and that's hard for non-aviation users to understand the value that an airport is bringing to that region. And, and that's highlights the importance of products like, you know, a good solid economic impact study to show, you know, all the jobs that are generated by the airport and all the economic impact that's being, you know, spread throughout a community. On the noise and emissions issues, you know, it's a no-brainer, as Andrew explained, you know, that these aircraft are going to be quieter. You know, they're not going to be zero emissions, and maybe with some of the hybrid aircraft concepts that are out there, maybe the lower emissions. You know, but we solve those problems, and then I think, you know, just learning from the experiences of airport closures, you know, if we can solve those three big issues or four big issues, then it comes to, you know, what's the highest and best use of the land, you know, and so that's more that economic, you know, telling an economic story of what the airport's doing and what the potential is, and you know, there's still a lot of work to be done with that. I think, you know, there are some challenges with the way small airports are managed and how their ability to leverage themselves as multimodal hubs. And that's something that we worked on in my time in Utah, and I imagine we're also going to work on, you know, within Los Angeles when the time is appropriate. You know, we understand that any multimodal hub, whether it be a freight hub or a transit hub, you know, there are certain synergies, you know, that are generated, you know, through that, and particularly within the passenger transit hubs, you know, you see exciting development. You see, you know, areas, you know, kind of transform, you know, around these hubs. They become more walkable. They become more, you know, active transportation friendly. You know, and we can do those same kind of things, you know, around airports. We just got to have that vision and that foresight to understand that all airports and future vertiports are also going to be multimodal hubs. Yeah. You know, and start working, you know, towards helping the community understand that, you know, we can extract benefits from that and seeing it in that way.
We have a question. I think I'm gonna give it to you, Andrew, because I think that you are speaking with all kinds of different cities all over the world in your business development role. So Ricardo Pilon says, which geographical regions are likely going to lead in adoption and can help us set examples elsewhere? Some interested parties are worried about first mover and expensive teething problems. Which regions are most forward acting?
Yeah, look, that's asking me to handicap, you know, who's gonna win the race, so to speak. And look, I don't view this as, you know, winning or getting there first. For me, this is about the process that a community goes through or a region goes through to implement these technologies and these aviation systems in the right way. I think that's really what we need to focus on. So it's not so much about being first, it's about the process to introducing these technologies in a community. And I think we're seeing great examples of that really globally. I mean, obviously the work that Clint and UML is leading with the city of LA, I think that's going to really form a blueprint for policies that can be used not only, you know, in other cities in the United States and North America, but hopefully globally. You know, I think there's some great work clearly happening in Europe. I know there's a lot of great work happening kind of at the EU level, but then there's lots of work going on within each nation. There's a lot that's happening in Asia. I know that I believe it was both Korea and Japan that have announced, you know, kind of at the federal level that they are planning for the introduction of urban air mobility in the coming years. So, you know, it's not so much again about who wins. I think you're going to see some form of advanced air mobility introduced in most regions of the world over the next few years. Again, it's about doing it right and setting the foundations from a policy perspective, a public acceptance perspective, and ensuring that the whole ecosystem is working together to do it right.
So you mentioned policy. I'm going to turn over to you, Tino, with the experience that you and your team have with regards to policy. So CESAR, the Single European Skies, or as my colleague from Lufthansa political department likes to call it, maybe it's going to be the Seamless European Skies. This has been a hard journey. This is not done yet. It's something that everybody wants, but still it's hard to get everybody to agree on regulations. What are the learnings that you see coming out of this CESAR mega project in terms of what the urban air mobility scene is going to experience over the next 24 to 48 months?
I mean, the title itself is somehow self-explaining. Yeah, it's SESAR is a European Sky Air Traffic Management Research. So it's at the end to use the European sky frame, let's say, in a better way as we are doing it today. And we are involved in that program since a couple of years. And I believe if we would like to have an infrastructure which is, let's say, convincing for the public areas, but also for the people who are using it, we need a European or a global solution infrastructure. Because today, I do not know how it is in the US, but in Germany, if you are using a public transportation train, the system is in every city different. You cannot use, let's say, your same ticket in Hamburg and Munich. It's always different, and you always have to look how is it working. And I think for the acceptance, and we talked about safety, we talked about technical challenges, we talked about vertiports, we talked about UAM and all that stuff. That's all that needs to be solved. We need to answer it. But I hope that we first get something, and maybe the smallest piece is in Europe, that we have one, let's say, similar way how we are implementing this infrastructure, how we are connecting this new infrastructure and way of mobility all over Europe. Because there was a slide, I don't know, was it from Vassilis at the beginning, city to city, yeah? The cities in the world, mega cities should stick their heads together and find a solution. That's also a way. But I think we need a European or a global way, and I hope that the infrastructure and the solutions is a little bit similar and easy to use for the user and the people at the end. I can't hear you.
Yes, I was on mute, obviously. So again, we haven't learned after a year and a half. This is still hard. Yeah. So Uber Elevate has left the scene, which could have potentially provided one of these platforms that you're talking about, the seamlessness that we all crave in our everyday lives with regards to all kinds of mobility. I'm also a user of the German train system and the local train system. And yes, it's not necessarily done yet. Mariya, I wanted to ask you, I think that I saw your face, you definitely also have an opinion about the seamlessness and the passenger experience. What would you like to say?
Yeah, no, definitely. Just wanted to say, I think there's, it's fantastic what Tino is saying, and definitely relates back to what Vassilis was mentioning in his slides. But also, I've just seen a question in the Q&A as well, sort of related to, I guess, how difficult, how easy indeed we can make this transition from your house or your place of work or wherever you're taking the UAM vehicle from to very much getting there. So if you are, say, for instance, traveling from your flat to the airport, do you need to have that extra, that last mile or the first mile that is done by another mode of transport? And indeed, how easy it is to get on board of another vehicle, be it your taxi or be it your e-scooters, whatever that is. But basically, how are we as an industry also looking at multimodality and integration, and indeed potentially looking at mobility as a system, mobility as a service mass concept, and how are we collaborating with our colleagues especially from the ground transportation? I think it is for going back to the public and what we've learned from our conversations with the members of general public is, regardless of their age and background, they really start thinking beyond your safety, your noise. Some of the other concerns are, how easy is it going to be for me to get out of my house and jump onto one of these vehicles? How soon is it going to be not only landing in my doorstep? Not only it's 2024, but how how easy and seamless of a journey are we talking about? Do I need to own another passport? Do I need to have another ticket? So I think this is really, really important also to realise that this is definitely a system of systems we're talking about, urban air mobility, and there is definitely a need to recognise and very much integrate and collaborate with others. Just because, again, people, if it is a bit too difficult, will opt out and just choose something that is already on, another app that is already on their phone. Again, going back to, I guess, Uber and just looking at how they were doing it. Very quickly as well, you mentioned the initial question there, and you asked about public fears and sort of what other challenges there are. What is public thinking? Noise is one of those challenges indeed, but again, from something that we've learned, especially young people, they're really keen on two matters: sustainability and impact on the environment, impact on nature. I haven't heard many people in the industry and many webinars really sort of address that issue of, say, for instance, bird migration, or indeed our impact on nature and the surrounding. But this is the question that gets asked quite often whenever we do STEM outreach and workshops with young people. These are the questions that they're concerned with. Maybe costs and noise and visual and noise pollution, maybe those will be the issues they'll be concerned with later on. But here and now, when we're talking about COP26 happening in Glasgow, we're talking about sustainability and let's not harm nature any further. These are the issues that especially young minds who will be building this future with us and for us and continue building this future after us, this is what they're concerned with. How are we as an industry addressing those issues? So
Airbus, Archer, this gives you a hint into the positioning that you might need to be looking into for your products coming up in 2024 and 2028, I think. Good. I have a couple of quick questions leading up to what we were talking about before. One for Vassilis from the audience, Domenico Gagliardi. How does Airbus see the use of existing infrastructures such as helipads or secondary airports for efficient development from the point of view of CapEx for this market?
As Tino mentioned, we have to use this, but my understanding is that the UAM, it is something more than just because then I think we fall more to what you mentioned, Erin, about electrifying the general aviation. I think the point is about providing a service that does not exist. From this perspective, I strongly believe that there is a need for new types of infrastructure. And here I think we have to differentiate a little bit between the electrification of aviation and UAM. UAM is enabled because of the electrification of aviation, but it is not just this. And I think we are confusing many times, and because we talk a lot about aviation, we talk about the noise, and usually we say, yes, it's quieter. Quieter to what? It's quieter to helicopters, perhaps to some planes, but do we have really helicopters over cities today? No. What we have are cars, trains. So you have seen in the study of EASA that what it was found, it was that we need to match the sound levels of a city. So this is a benchmark. It's not a helicopter or a plane. At the same time, what is happening with the electrification of mobility, we have electric cars. So in fact, many noises are reduced. So what are we going to do with the aviation part of it? We're going to provide, in fact, add some noise. How are we going to manage this? So we need as a society to justify and accept why we are ready to accept, to embrace this type of noise. There must be a reason for that, a good cause. These are, for me, the big challenges.
So we have two conflicting kind of discussions here. We have, on the one hand, this idea that if we take a piloted, what Andrew was talking about, we take a piloted aircraft, which is now sustainable and quieter than classical general aviation aircraft. And we fly this with a pilot. They have the same safety standards as aviation, and therefore it's just a better product. There's no kind of downdraw or drawback to having a product like this. This is maybe less of a jump for people to get on board with, because it is just a better aircraft, a more modern version of what we had already. Then we have the other kind of camp, which says this is a completely new intermodality offer. It enables a lot of things which we never had before. And this is potentially also an inspirational way to get people on board. What is the right road to drive here between this is just a better aircraft for the same system, or this is a completely revolutionary thing? One of them is going to potentially be easier for reluctant people to get on board with. The other one is going to be easier to inspire. Maybe different users have to develop different kind of positioning. What is the, maybe as a final note?
I don't think it's right or wrong. It is just different.
Mariya, last words on that. We have just a minute left. Last words on that idea.
I think it's the messaging is important in general, and I think we as an industry are sort of, I think we're converging towards something to very similar messaging. Again, very much around the sustainability, around revolution, I think, rather than evolution, and towards a very different way of living and very different way of transporting. I think my main worry is, again, how do we make sure that not just ourselves as an industry are on board and on the same page with our messaging, but indeed how do we make sure that the media, especially those without our background, without aerospace and engineering background, how do they portray this industry the right way? How do we not only talk about drones as destroying, how do we talk about drones and urban air mobility as inspirational, as the future? Where is that balance, and how do we make sure that, again, everyone's on the same page?
Clint, last thought from you, 10 seconds. We can hear you.
Can you?
Yeah.
Oh, my microphone is muted. Okay. No, really, I think just for last final parting thoughts, I mean, this has been a tremendous panel right here, and I really appreciate everybody's contributions, and it's just been awesome. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to participate in all this, and definitely look forward to future opportunities, to participate in stuff along these lines. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Last thoughts.
Yeah, so to echo Clint's words, this has been really fantastic, bringing these thought leaders together for this conversation. I know I've personally learned a lot, and I think, Erin, to your point, is this evolutionary or revolutionary? I think it can be both, right? It's technology in and of itself that I think is evolutionary, but it unlocks revolutionary types of potential for our communities and the benefits for our communities. And I think that is truly the intersection of how this can all come together and provide benefits for all stakeholders.
I would have to agree. Tino, last thoughts from your side.
Yeah, I also learned a lot, and also from your personal and business background here. I believe evolutionary will be the integration into the existing infrastructure. It will not be revolutionary, it will be evolutionary. That's my clear view. Revolutionary will be the way how, let's say, transportation in inner city and between cities will be organized. So that, in my eyes, will really be in revolution, because it will go from the ground to the air. And this will be a totally new way to travel from the experience and from everything. Yeah.
So I think that you guys are all looking forward to your first flight on an air taxi, and I hope that I will get there before you. But let's see. I look forward to hearing about it. Whoever comes first, maybe Andrew might beat me as well. We'll see. I wanted to say thank you guys for all of your thoughts and and contributing today. It was a great panel, and we have a couple of sessions coming up in the next year, so look forward to seeing the commercial aspects covered, and some others as well. So thank you so much. We have a sustainability one, I think, coming up as well. So thank you so much for participating. Thank you to our audience, and see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you.